All right. Welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and it is a Wednesday, and that's a day when normally I always tell you I feel kind of good. I'm halfway through the week. It kind of feels like I've accomplished something, even if I haven't accomplished anything at all. Well, today we're through the year. Actually, this is going to be my last show, I believe, of 2025. There is a possibility, I suppose. Maybe I'll jump in and do an extra show next week, early in the week, or even Friday, but I doubt that. That's very unlikely. So I'm going to present this as the final program, the year, and come back either a week from Friday, which would be the 2nd, I believe, or possibly not until the 1 week from this Monday. So bit of a break, and I've been taking some time off. I had been sick. It took me a little bit of time to recover, still not feeling 100% family situation, but all in all, I'm pleased with the way the show is proceeding, Halitics, that is. We've had some great guests in recent days. We're seeing, I think, a higher average number of viewers, which is really good. I'm delighted to see it. Obviously, the number of subscribers continues to rise as well. So all of that is good. I'm feeling positive about the trajectory of Halitics, and I just hope you'll be part of it, continue to be part of it as we move forward. 240-242-5646. Join me today at any time. It's kind of like a free-for-all, an end-of-the-year free-for-all. I use the free-for-all background for the image, although I call this today's program end-of-year special. And we'll kind of stick with some of the topics we've been focused on in recent days and weeks. But again, if you want to join me at any time, please do. On Halitics. Yeah, and please do, like I said, click subscribe. So I'm going to start. I'll get right into it. The Patriotic Blonde. So I have been featuring often more conservative commentators on Halitics. Often I have found that they seem to be a little bit more willing. Now, I'm sure there's exceptions, but, the MAGA team, even people who are really dead set supporters of Trump, are seemingly more willing to criticize him, some of them anyway. And we saw this even with Charlie Kirk, who went into the White House and said, hey, don't attack Iran. Don't act as Israel's cat's paw and go into Iran. That's not what we elected you to do. So we have seen the right, seemingly, at least from my perspective, more honest, more willing to confront its leaders, its terrible leaders, than Democrats, and some progressives have been willing to confront its, if to the extent I'm on that side of the fence, and I think I was rightly described as a leftist more than a progressive, whatever the terms are. But so many of us, I would say, who are on the left, who share my values when it comes to what government's obligations are, what society's obligations are to each other, so many of us seem unwilling to confront the corrupt leadership on the left, or in the Democratic Party anyway. It's a terrible disservice. You're doing a terrible disservice to the extent that you act as a cover for the Democratic Party. That is not helping our country move forward. Just the opposite. So here's the Patriotic Blonde. Dear liberals, and I got this from one of my Facebook friends, so I didn't discover this on my own. I didn't even know who this person was until I saw one of my FB friends post this. And there's somebody who I think is pretty good, pretty willing to can take on the Democrats. Dear Patriot Blonde, dear liberals, you and I are not friends. You can see 4 hours. I think it was maybe yesterday this was posted. We disagree on everything from abortion to the Second Amendment. Your belief system is abhorrent. Wow, that's pretty strong. To nearly every person, this is to liberals. So I'm not, I think a lot of times people on the right mischaracterize, misstate, misunderstand what some liberal positions are. And I don't like to say I've moved away from liberalism because there's much in what I would call traditional liberal, American liberalism that I really do support, whether it's calling, some of the things JFK said he believed in, even if he didn't always act. He was pretty aggressive. He was pretty militant. He did accelerate in Vietnam, for example, and he reduced taxes on the rich. So JFK, I'm sorry, did some bad things. He was kind of a wishy-washy liberal. He wasn't a true leftist, but the way he discussed liberalism, which was taking on the elites, fighting for the forgotten man, for the underdog, that's what I believe is in the best tradition, the John Stuart Mill version of liberalism, the best tradition of liberalism. So, I think what the Patriot, how she describes it, I think her understanding probably mistaken to some degree. Kind of a big government protecting corporation, socialism, kind of a view of liberalism as the Obamacare, right? The Obamacare model. We're actually going to use government money, taxpayer money, to buy private insurance. A terrible idea. I don't like to call that liberal. Although I guess you could if you want to. So anyway, she says, the Patriot Blonde, your views are abhorrent. That said, you did try to warn us about Trump. You screamed and yelled from the mountaintops that he was not what he presented himself to be. And I, like many, refused to listen. So she's navel gazing. She's saying, hey, what did I do wrong? What did I miss? You told me something and I ignored you. Was I wrong to do that? And I want to just give this Patriotic Blonde a tremendous credit. That's how political conversation should go. You're willing to look at where you got things wrong, where you made mistakes. And if people say, well, Hal, you never do that, I'll say, well, first of all, I do. But second of all, what have I gotten wrong? I guess, and I have been willing to say, look, I didn't think Trump would be this bad. For those who said Kamala's awful, she's a terrible, terrible candidate. And not only is she a bad candidate, but she's actually a bad person. But on balance, I'm going to vote for her because she's not quite as bad as Trump. I kind of disagreed with that. I thought, well, no, she's probably just as bad. I was wrong. I was wrong about that. No, I won't. I'll say this, that was a legitimate position. That was a much more legitimate position to take than I thought. Trump has been that bad. Even still, we talk about this with Carlos. Would things be that much different if Kamala was president? There's one area right now we're going to talk about later in the show where we may be slightly better off. It's an important issue too. It's important. Maybe slightly better off with President Trump than we would be under Harris. So the Patriot Blonde, though, back to her. I mocked you, liberal. I laughed at you when Trump won. I felt entitled to his victory because I dedicated 8 years of my life to his campaign. My eyes are now open. This is not the man I vote for. When I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I am sorry. I apologize. So that's an opening. That is someone who's saying to you, they're making themselves vulnerable. They're saying, yeah, you know what? Maybe you had something there when you were dissing Trump and attacking Trump. And I kind of, because I'm mad at you, because I don't like the policies that you've pursued. And I think they've done harm to our country. Now, we need specifics, but that's her take. And I think the right response would be, thank you. Thank you for acknowledging that your guy is a bad guy. And let me do the same. Let me acknowledge that your mistake in backing Trump was actually pretty darn understandable under the circumstances, given how terrible the choices offered to you were from the Democratic side. Now, yes, you should have, if you could have, you should have actually, even as a Republican, you should have re-registered as a Democrat and voted for Bernie in 2016. No question about that. Probably should have done the same thing in 2020. You should have voted for Jill Stein. You should have never voted for Trump, no matter what. But I get it. We get it. We live in what's considered to be a duopoly. And the two choices suck. So yeah, I get it. Your mistake was thinking Trump was a good choice. He wasn't. But that's the mistake that so many, quote, libs, as she would call them, have also made by thinking that Harris was a good choice. She was, the most qualified person who's ever run for president. Well, you got to vote for her. She's so great. No, not at all. The response at my friend's Facebook page was really disappointing from a lot of people. Not a appreciation for the patriotic blonde's, movement, her self-acknowledgement of error. None of that. Some did. But I just wanted to highlight what I thought were some pretty pathetic responses. And I'm not going to identify the people who gave them. So, one person, yes, but people who say this, what are they going to do about it? I'll tell you what, the Patriot Blonde is doing a lot about it. She's posting, she's got a big following on X, and she's posting aggressively about it. And it's clear what she's trying to do about it is, take support from Trump and push Republicans to break with him and pursue policies that she believes will be better for the American public. Some of those policies, I agree with her, would be better for the American public. So she's actually doing something about it. But even if and look at all the people who liked it, oh yeah, well, what are you going to do about it? Well, read her friggin' X page. It's very clear what she's doing about it. A lot. But if you don't think what she's doing is enough or you don't agree with it, well, then this is my answer to you. Provide a alternative course of action. Say, hey, you know what? You came forward. You said Trump's policy, Trump's covering, trying to cover up the Epstein files and the redactions, because that's one of the things that she's really ticked off about is the Epstein efforts ongoing to cover up, or the Trump efforts ongoing to cover up the Epstein files. But there's so much more. The way that Trump responded to the Rob Reiner and his wife, the murder of Rob Reiner's wife, pissed off a lot of Republicans. We'll see from Halitics Facebook page, the run up to war against Venezuela is definitely not popular among many MAGA folks. Indeed, even the roundups of immigrants and people who maybe look like they might be an immigrant or they're hanging out with immigrants, that's not playing so well either in MAGA world in many cases. The support for Israel clearly is a very, very divisive factor, divisive policy when it comes to Trump world. So a lot of areas where, Trump is losing support, not just because of the Epstein files. And the Patriot Blonde, to her credit, is making the same case, right? Saying these are bad policies. But if you don't think the Patriot Blonde is doing enough, what are you going to do about it? Give an option. Say, hey, join us. Join the fight for Medicare for all, which you won't get them to probably do, but you might, because if you remember back in 2016, even Trump did campaign for universal health care. And I can tell you right now, there is a principled opposition on the right to Obamacare. It's not just, it was Obama, so it has to be bad. It's also, hey, taxpayer money shouldn't go to these obscenely rich, overpaid death panel companies, because the insurance companies are the death panels, right? Because they decide, we're not going to give you the care you need. We're not going to pay for this life-saving medication. So they're the gatekeepers. They're the death panels. And a lot of Republicans don't like that. Now, they may not want government-run insurance either. But you would be surprised where you can find common ground with Republicans on how much they can't stand the health insurance companies and how they would join you if you can come up with legitimate ways to reduce the ability they have to destroy American life. So come up with areas, which is what we try to do here at Halitics all the time. Bring people together, bring poor, struggling, working, and middle-class people together to make life a little bit easier, a little less painful, a little less challenging for them, for them, right? Take a little bit from the billionaire. Well, I want to take a lot from the billionaires, not just a little. I want to take most of what they have. So what are they going to do about it? So the response, well, not a thing, which is absurd because obviously she's doing a lot. She liked the guy who campaigned. That's pretty awful. She's disappointed how he's governing, but she liked Mr. MAGA Pants and his cornucopia of prevarications, falsehoods, and other filthy lies. She was good with the hate. She just doesn't like the Epstein files. Well, that's misrepresenting. There's a lot else that the Patriot Blonde makes clear she doesn't like. She also made clear that part of the reason she supported Trump and she took joy in his victory is because she was owning the libs. And I think on the left, or at least in the Democratic Party, you have to understand why people might feel that way. Because there certainly is an arrogance, a condescension. You see it in this comment, filthy lies, which isn't totally inaccurate. Trump was really bad, is really bad, but it's only part of the story to take the position that you can't under any circumstances vote for Trump. In fact, you have to do everything you can possibly to defeat him, which means you have to vote for Hillary. You have to vote for Harris. There's no moral equivalency between the two. Clearly, they're morally superior in every way to Trump. You take that position, that's a load of crap. That's not fair. That's not true. That's not accurate. You're embracing evil as well when you vote for a Harris or you vote for a Clinton. So to take that position of moral superiority is incredibly off-putting and dishonest to boot. And then when he runs for president in 28, she'll vote for him. That's just not true. If it is true, then obviously the Patriot Blonde is just lying on her X feed because she's made it clear she can't stand Trump. She's totally against Trump. Every other post, every other X is like how bad Trump is. So we on the, I don't want to say left, those Democrats, if you really want to win, enough with the condescension, enough with the moral superiority. You want to attack Republican leaders, do it all day long. Point out their hypocrisies, point out their corruption, point out their self-dealing, the lies, the killing, right? The extrajudicial killings, all of that. But don't go after the voters. You want those voters, or you should want to win elections. If you really think Trump is that bad, which obviously he is, if you really think Republicans are that bad, which they are, Republican leadership, then you need to do everything you can to defeat them, which means reaching out to their voters, to their base, not to their former leaders who are often reviled and with good reason, like Dick Cheney, like Liz Cheney. That's not how you win. You win by appealing to their interests, especially when the interests of many conservative voters, Republican voters, are very similar to the interests of Democratic voters. Fair day's pay for a fair day's work. Healthcare, education, affordable higher education, a culture, a clean environment. These are not desires. These are not preferences unique to Democratic voters. So when a Republican influencer like the Patriot Blonde reaches out to you, the last thing you should do is slap their hand away. And I responded, not to admit, I'm not real proud exactly of my response on this page. It kind of blew it, although it got some positive likes, although not all. But here's what I wrote. I think you can read it. Let me see if I can boost it. But I would take this back. I would write it a little differently in future. It's done. So I wrote our moral duty, and I put that in, I highlighted it and squared it because that's kind of arrogant, right? Like I'm telling everyone else what their moral duty is. I believe this, by the way, but it is arrogant. Our moral duty is to acknowledge the broad and obvious shortcomings of Democratic leaders and candidates and to pledge to run pro-people, pro-worker, pro-peace candidates. I should have written, I think the best response, this is what I should have written, in quotes, quote, I think the best response to the patriotic blonde's generous acknowledgement of error is to acknowledge the broad and obvious shortcomings of Democratic leaders. In other words, find common ground. Try to build a coalition that can elect good people. And the response was, dude, our moral duty is to ask where she was before Trump screwed up on the Epstein file. Well, you can find out again. She was already critical. She was on board with every abusive thing. You know, even if that were true, let's say that were true. So what? So now you come back with, hey, glad you finally saw the light. Let's move forward, not beat people over the head. And I always believe, again, what we need to do first and foremost. And by the way, I didn't do this as a kid. I often was the last person to acknowledge error or modify behavior. So I get what people don't. But look, hey, if you want to win elections, you want to make change, then you do. Talk to people where they are. You listen to people where they are. You get to yes, not you get to, yeah, you suck. You're an idiot. I'm not going to listen to you. You're a fool. No, you don't do that. Let me see. There was I was going to show this, but I'm going to jump. I'm going to keep with the Patriot on for just a moment longer. Then I want to play a clip that was posted on Halitics that I actually thought was quite funny, although extremely provocative, and I thought the response was also amusing. So we're going to do that. But I just wanted to just show you one more thing that the Patriot Blonde showed that I think really shows you how there is real room to reach out to and work with Trump voters, Republican voters. And this is so the opposite. By the way, you see so many people who don't do this, and there have been people on a lot of like the big hitters on YouTube, on the Democratic side, the Kalinskis, the Rational Nationals, who's that guy, Mike Figueretto. The Rational Nationals, David Dole. And then there's Mike Figueretto, I forget what he goes by, but they exist. Their shtick is to mock, shame, and embarrass Republican voters, Trump voters. That's the wrong way to go. Vosh does that too. Wrong way to go. That's not how you win. That's how they get better ratings. That's how they can get bigger checks from YouTube, from Google. That's not how you win elections. That's not how you make the country a better place. So for all the ones who are attacking the Patriot, she never broke with Trump and she only cares about the Epstein files and nothing else. The Trump admin just announced that in January they will begin garnishing the wages of Americans who have defaulted on their federal student loans after they just gave another $38 billion to Israel. So look at all that's in there. She's going after Trump, the federal government, right, for garnishing wages. Working people. She's siding with working people who owe money on their, student loans. And she's saying, hey, man, there's something wrong here with these for-profit student loan Shylocks that are stealing from the American people legally with basically carte blanche from Congress, both Democrats and Republicans. Joe Biden, a big fan. Joe Biden responsible in large part for the unshackling of the student loan crooks. And then she goes on to also attack Trump for giving all that aid to the genocidal state of Israel. So these are all progressive, all leftist, or they should be leftist talking points. This is how you reach out to Trump voters. because there are a lot of them who actually owe student loan, who have student loan debt. They're going to see their wages garnished. There are so many Americans, left, right, and center, who are so disgusted with the unconditional support for Israel. And yet you're going to go after the Patriot bond just when she's coming around to your side. Big, big, big mistake. So, yeah, I mean, that's so the opposite of what I'm trying to do here. That's so contradictory to what I'm trying to do here. 240-242-5646. So this was posted by Arlen. I'm not going to hide anything. Arlen, by the way, will continue to be a regular co-host of Halitics. But he posted this, and at first I was like, do you really need to do this? By the way, I don't like, the whole thing is here, this is Trump is Putin's pig, right? Putin's, pet pig. And I greatly would prefer to go after Trump for his, docility, his unwillingness in any way to take on Netanyahu, who, as bad as Putin may be, Netanyahu's clearly worse in terms of crimes against humanity. And that's saying something. I mean, if you're worse than Putin, hey, if you're worse than Trump, you're pretty damn bad. So I think there can be no doubt that Trump's policies with respect to Israel are worse by an order of magnitude than his policies towards Russia. But that said, I did think this was pretty damn funny. Not because I even really agree with the sentiment, but I mean, the imagery is funny, and the pig getting the slop and all that. It's pretty damn funny. Let's face it, it is. So I'm going to even play this video a little bit. I think it's obviously satire. No one's really claiming this is, really Trump and Putin together, right? I mean, we all get this is supposed to be funny, and it's not supposed to reflect reality. So let me play the video, because I think it's pretty funny. So you can see there the Trump at the trough. And I love this, that he's getting washed by Putin. It's pretty funny. And then I guess that's the guy. By the way, he said, please share, right? I think he's the creator. He said, please share. So very funny, amusing. I laughed. We laughed, we cried. It was funny. I'm laughing at it. But yeah, it's kind of a guilty pleasure, right? Because the relationship between Putin and Trump isn't nearly as one-sided as presented there, whereas the one between Putin and Netanyahu, maybe Trump just totally agrees with Bibi, but he's given Bibi everything he wants. So yeah, I thought it was funny, but I also agreed with what Jeff wrote in response. Jeff and I have a long and fraught history going way back to my Monterey days, and I always found Jeff's comments to be caustic and often counterproductive. He wasn't looking to be for solutions, but just to try to tear down what we're trying to do here. So I never liked that. But, look, I try to, again, reach people where they are. And hey, if he's going to watch my videos, if he's going to take them, I guess, seriously, I'm going to be appreciative. So here's his comment, towards Arlen. And he writes, are you still in grade school? Now I laughed. I'm like, yeah, I think that's funny, because you know what? It's like a grade school video. It's what kids, like 5th grade boys, would think was really funny. And I thought it was really funny. And I guess we all kind of have that in us. And so I said, hey, this is funny. And to be fair, so is Jeff's rejoinder. So trying to, lighten things up in our holiday season, and also recognize that video, while definitely funny, the AI is outstanding, really doesn't fairly, in my opinion, certainly capture the relationship we have between Trump and Putin. And many people say he is Putin's puppet, or Putin this. Yeah, I'm not buying it. Sorry, I'm just not going to buy it. 240, would love to talk to you. 240-242-5646. Got a lot of views. Some of our videos recently have done really well. I'm really pleased. I want you to check out RF Wally for county council in Montgomery County at large. So if you live in the county anywhere, you can vote for him. as long as you're registered in advance of the Democratic primary. As a Democrat, I will do that. I will re-register so I can vote for him in that primary. And also, Ethan Weckluck, really, really good, really outstanding candidate in D6 for Congress in Maryland. So I hope you'll get a chance to check him out as well. Right here, we're closing out a terrible year. I want to hear from you. I'd love to talk to you on my last program of the year. I'm looking in the chat. I'm not seeing chats, but no, we'll see. Maybe someone will chat right now. 240-242-5646. I said, and I stand by it, that Trump, there's an argument, certainly, that in important areas, Trump wasn't quite as bad as Harris Biden. And I say Harris Biden because remember, she said she can't think of a thing she'd do differently. So basically, Kamala Harris was running to be Joe Biden in his second term. One of the worst policies that Joe Biden pursued during his one term in office, and I would say it was the very worst until he became a Netanyahu puppet, BB, yes man, was the exacerbation of war with Russia, was the pursuit of endless war with Russia, the refusal to push for peace with between Russia and Ukraine, and in fact to magnify the destruction. I give Trump, grudging credit. He said he would end the war day one. It proved much harder than I think he really actually believed it would prove. But see here, Zelensky opens way to demilitarized zone in eastern Ukraine to reach peace. That's got to be as a result of pressure from Trump. I got to believe that. Witkoff, Trump are saying to him, this is the deal. We're not going to keep giving you weapons. And we're not going to go to war with Russia. We don't want a nuclear war. It's not going to happen. So you got to trade land. And it's not even trading. It's just a DMZ, right? All of this could have been avoided. We even heard a Biden foreign policy person say, yeah, maybe we should have just said, Ukraine ain't joining NATO. That's not going to happen. And maybe this all could have been. Wow. So you're admitting that hundreds of thousands of deaths, billions and billions of dollars worth of damage, shattered lives, all of that, if you just had said, yeah, Ukraine doesn't need to be part of NATO, that all could have been. Wow. And that admission, which is something we all kind of knew was true, I think, to my way of thinking, justified looking at Trump as a potentially less bad option than Biden. And when you factor in that Biden, of course, promoted the genocide in Israel, by Israel in Palestine, it's hard to make the case that there was that the vote for Harris Biden was somehow morally superior to the one that Trump voters made. And I won't make that argument. I hope there's peace. I hope the killing stops in Eastern Europe. It would be very, very, very. We thought after the Democrats lost so badly in 24, Trump, that the party would basically cover it up. They would offer a bunch of kind of anodyne explanations that didn't touch on the real reasons, which was, of course, supporting genocide, which turned off many millions of Biden voters from 2020 who decided not to vote in 24. We know that from a number of surveys. The refusal to acknowledge the deep economic pain millions and millions of Americans were feeling as a result of runaway inflation. These were the big factors. The inability of Kamala Harris to give straight answers to straightforward questions, all this were major factors. And we all knew this, but we also were certain, we're confident that the Democratic Party would not come to terms with these. Because if it did, if it acknowledged its errors, if it acknowledged these were the causes, not, oh, well, we didn't communicate well with young people, we should have gone on more podcasts. If that was, if they came forward with the real reasons, their policy failings, their corruption. Because the reason for the bad policies the Democrats pursue is because they're corrupt. They take money from billionaires, from corporations. That's why they pursue bad policies, like endless war with Russia, like genocide, like Obamacare rather than Medicare for all. They're corrupt. They're bought and paid for. They're owned. But if the Democratic Party acknowledged that, they'd really be stuck because they'd have to either stop being so corrupt, which would hurt them. It would hurt the leadership. They all have those golden parachutes. They make millions. Howard Dean gets I don't know if he still does, got $1 million a year for being a for-profit healthcare lobbyist. So did Dick Gephardt. Big time, big shot Dems. Look at how incredibly rich the Clintons have become since they left the White House. So acknowledging Barack Obama lives in that incredible compound, or he, it's his, I don't live there. It's his summer estate on Martha's Vineyard. There's great rewards for the lucky few at the top of the Democratic tree if they just continue to be corrupt. So they're not going to admit it. We all were sure they wouldn't. And then Ken Martin, the darling of the progressive left, gets elected to be the DNC chair. And he says, we're going to do an autopsy. We're not going to pull punches. We're going to look at our faults and we're going to publish it. And guess what? He got all the support. I don't know if PDA, our revolution, Joseph Guy Varghese, that's our guy, Ken Martin. Well, guess what? We were right. The institutional left was totally wrong. Those of us who said, nah, they're not going to tell us how they lost this election. They're not going to come clean. Guess what? We were right. Despite a pledge from DNC Chair Ken Martin to release the post-election report, the committee announced Thursday, that's last week, that's a week ago, tomorrow, yeah, that it will not share publicly. I think Carlos and I touched on this, but I wanted to get into greater detail. It's despicable. It's disgusting. That kind of decision tells you this party ain't going to change. Now, you can elect your Mom Donnies, and maybe we'll get Graham Plattner past Janet Mills. But ultimately, this party is a billionaire's party. This is a corporatist party. This is a warmonger's party. And I'm not saying that can't or will never change. I'm saying that it hasn't changed. That's where we are right now. And taking some kind of joy in electing Ken Martin when he clearly has demonstrated and had demonstrated beforehand that he was a go along, get along Democrat. He was not going to take on the party elites. Well, it was self-serving. It was a way for you to claim a win for your institution, for yourself, if you were backing Martin without actually taking on the party, without actually doing the real work to build an opposition to these corrupt people. And that's where we are now. That's where the Democratic Party is now. We're not going to acknowledge it wrong. If you look at the statement by Ken Martin, and by the way, this is all part of the theme we're talking about today, right? That Democratic voters have a hell of a nerve presenting themselves as morally superior to Republicans, as though, they're some sort of, they have a bad smell about them. When you look at your own party, that's what you need to do. By the way, hey Ari, happy holidays to you as well. And again, 240-242-5646. So here's Ken Martin's explanation for why he's not going to do what he promised to do, which is to release that autopsy, that postmortem. Here's what he says. well, we're putting our learnings into motion. We had these great wins with people like Abigail Spanberger and who's the one in New Jersey? I can't remember. And yeah, you got to win in New York with a city with a real progressive, a DSA guy, but that was just notwithstanding the pretty much united opposition of party leadership, at least until the very, very end, against Mamdani. So I don't think you put your learnings into motion so much as you're liking to claim, Ken Martin. It's more just that people have turned against Trump, and with good reason. It's not anything you've done. But why aren't you going, so we're doing it. We're already following that autopsy. Well, really? Well, what did you do? What did the autopsy tell you to do that you're doing? Because I'd love to know. But he won't tell you. But what he will tell you is I talked to stakeholders. Now, I hate that term. Who stakeholder? Every friggin' American is a stakeholder when it comes to the Democratic Party. This is one of the two major parties. How the Democratic Party conducts its business, how the Democratic Party governs, the policies that Democratic Party politicians espouse and promote. Every single American is affected by that. We're all, quote, stakeholders. That's like a capitalist term, right? Oh, well, the people who really count are the people who give us money. They're the stakeholders. They're the ones we're really responding to. The people who count are the actual elected officials, not you, not just the voter. It's despicable. It's disgusting. That language, that lingo, the stakeholders. Every single American is impacted by the Democratic Party's policies, its actions. We're stuck with this awful Trump because you could barely bestir yourself to be a little, even, a lot less awful. If at best you could be just a little tiny bit less awful, because that's what your stakeholders wanted, Ken Martin. So look, this is just, again, more reason this party is not for me. It's not for the American people. I have to say, look, I worked for Our Revolution for a while. I really find that group more and more turning me off. So I want to play this clip because they supported Ken Martin. And now he's refusing to take the kind of steps necessary to transform that party into a pro-worker, pro-consumer, pro-peace, pro-environment party. He won't do it because the way you win, the reason the Democrat Party lost is going to be trade workers, betrayed the fundamental values that Americans want to believe the party espouses. It did that. And unless it, and it's going to continue to do that. That's why I won't present the post-mortem. So what we need from our progressive institutions like Our Revolution is a willingness to confront this evil that is the Democratic Party. And they're not willing to do it. So this is where Joseph Guy-Varghese, the executive director of Our Revolution, was nearly a year ago after Ken Martin was elected to be the DNC chair with the support of Our Revolution, with the support of Our Revolution board members, Jane Klebb. When I say board members, Our Revolution board members, and also DNC board members, Jane Klebb of Nebraska and Larry Cohen of CWA in Maryland. Here's Joseph with Brianna Joy Gray on Bad Faith. And let me just get it here. Let me just start this here. So there they are. She's also got Marianne Williamson with her as well.
Election. I want to start with you, Joseph. What do you make of Ken Martin being chosen?
So I want to just stop it right there. We'll get Joseph's response, but it's a really, really, really straightforward question. It does not admit of, some sort of dodge or evasion. What do you make of it? Is it good or bad? Are you happy with Martin or aren't you? And listen to how nuanced and evasive Joseph is?
When we're looking at the candidates, the first thing I would note is it was a race between Ken Martin and Ben Wickler. Ben was backed by.
So he doesn't it right. I mean, already. Oh, what do you make of Kamala Harris? Well, you got to understand it was a race between Kamala and Trump. What do you think about the Israeli killing of 40, 50, 60, 70,000 Gazans? Oh, let's look back at what really, let's be clear. What started this was October 7th. So that's what we're seeing here. Not any kind of straightforward response, not anything, well, there's things we like about Ken Martin, things we don't. He wasn't great. That's what you say if you want to answer that question in a somewhat nuanced way. You can't say, well, say, look, it's a limited party. This is the best we could do of a bad lot. That's the right answer if you want to defend him. Not just say, whoa, it was a choice. But you know what? Marianne Ann Williamson was one of the choices.
Billionaires, including Reid Hoffman. He was backed by Soros. He was backed.
Oh, so Ben Wickler sucked, not what do you make of Ken? Because the question was about Ken Martin. So he's telling you how bad Ben Wickler is. Ben Wickler got all these billionaire endorsements. Now, last I checked, James Clyburn endorsed Ken Martin. He ain't so great, James Clyburn. He's one of the major problems in the Democratic Party.
The Democracy Alliance, which is a dark money Democratic organization. And the reason I want to bring, and then Wickler was also endorsed by Pelosi, Schumer, Jeffries, right? The Democratic financial establishment and political establishment were lined up against Ken Martin and for Ben Wickler. So what I would say is sometimes you can tell who your friends are by understanding who the opponents.
Right. And so I'll stop it there because again, he doesn't give you anything positive about Ken Martin. He just says, well, Wickler was worse. So you can tell who your friends are by who their enemies are, right? Of course, Jim Clyburn, again, a friend of Martin. But in any event, Joseph telling you, this guy, Ken Martin, the guy who said, hey, we're going to publicize that autopsy and now refuses to, he's our friend. So and they supported him. Presumably, I'm not saying they do, presumably our revolution has some kind of sway over Ken Martin, some influence. Now, I'll be real come clean. I am trying to get our Revolution Maryland groups to put together a letter, and I've actually drafted one. We'll see what happens with it, to go to Joseph demanding that he and our revolution call on publicly Ken Martin to release that autopsy. We'll see if that letter goes out and what the response is if it does. I hope it does. We'll see. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. Since that decision was made by Ken Martin, I'm not going to release the autopsy, I've gotten 3 fundraising emails from our revolution. Not one of them mentions the Ken Martin announcement. Not one of them describes the disappointment, the betrayal by a candidate who was supported and won with our revolution's backing. Not one of them mentions that. Instead, we got no kings. They're coming for no kings. We're risk of pulling back for 2026. Send us more money. Can you help? Well, why would I help you when you back a guy who pulls the rug out from under those of us on the left who want the Democrat Party to come clean about its terrible campaign and its terrible policies that cost the Americans any kind of decent presidency? And when I say that, I don't mean just because it cost us because Trump won. It meant that even if Harris had won, we'd still have an awful president. All right, 240-242-5646. I hope you're looking forward to a great holiday season. I certainly am. There's an article that Ross Douthat wrote, or Douthat, I'm not sure, in the New York Times. There's a simpler explanation for the rightward shift of young men. Douthat is one of the, I guess he would self-proclaim, self-described Republican. on the Times editorial page, but the Times editorial page is such a op-ed page is such a sewer at this point anyway. It's so pathetic. It's sewer, yeah, it's a sewer because you have people like David French and Brett Stevens totally defending the genocidal state of Israel, but there's really very little. Who are the two black columnists there? Both of whom, two black male columnists who basically just consistently extol identity politics or constantly promoting race-based grievances rather than discussing the class divide, the fact that poor Australian working people are of all races, all ethnicities. They need to come together. That does not suit the politics of the Democratic editorial board, its leaders. So they don't talk about the need to unite poor, struggling, and working class people across race lines. Instead, they talk specifically about the problems facing Black Americans, which are real, I'm not denying that, but you don't solve them by pointing fingers only at white people and saying that the real problem is racism, not the real problem is a capitalist, a crony capitalist, a corrupt capitalist system that's left so many tens of millions of Americans, hundreds of millions, billions of people worldwide behind of all races and colors. So that's a huge problem. Jamel Bowie, that's one, and then the other. So on CNN a lot, or used to be. Is it Charles? Maybe. There are just so many to criticize on that editorial page. Michelle Goldberg, maybe a little less awful than the others, but very weak. Her writing is not particularly impressive. There's nothing exciting, interesting, provocative about Michelle Goldberg's articles. I guess Edsall might be the best, but they've neutered him too. So really nobody particularly good. Maybe Douthat's about the least bad. So what is the point of this opinion piece is why have many young white men moved to the Republican side of the aisle, moved right. And it's not just white, right? Because we saw that with black men as well in 24. And Douthat cites to a piece, I can't remember where it was, but where a guy talks about how, at least in the entertainment industry and in writing and academia over the past 10, 12 years, there have been fewer and fewer jobs available to white men. That there's been a decided shift, especially entry-level and mid-level positions are more and more being occupied by women and people of color. And this is causing understandable dismay among the people who aren't getting jobs. Many of them are white men, and they perceive themselves, whether accurately or not, as being the victims of what DEI or identity politics. He's saying, hey, this is causing this group of people to move right. I don't know how you could argue that's not the case. You could say, well, it's still fair. It's still what we should have. For too long, academia was dominated by white men. Now, at least we're making things a little fairer. You can make that argument. I think what the response would be is it's not really fair now because they've gone too far to the other side. The percentage of white male hires in Hollywood, in academia now is actually well below the percentage who are applying for those jobs, or even the percentage in the American population, right? So maybe 10, 15, I mean, really low numbers. I don't know if they're accurate. I'm just telling you what the piece said. But, 10, 15, 20% of new hires in some of these desirable jobs are white men, even if white men are like 40% of the population, 45. So they're seeing a significantly fewer, disproportionately small number of new hires, and promotions are going to white men. And this is causing them to say the system isn't working for us. The whole idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion isn't helping us, it's not working for us. We have to go somewhere else. I don't really see how that's arguable. People are going to do what they think is best for them. That's just how society works. And when you live in a winner take all, you're on your own America, if you perceive, and in this case apparently accurately, that you're not getting where you want to be, in part because of policies that the Democratic Party is espousing, then you're not going to vote for Democrats. It's just that simple. Now, you can say that's not right. You can say that those white men should say, well, for centuries, we got too much. We got too big a piece of the pie. And of course, that's true for many white men. But it's also true that many white men didn't get any kind of pie at all. That many of the homeless, you go back, look, I was watching this video in the 1930s. Maybe it was 1929. I'm not really sure. No, it was in the 1890s, going all the way back 2 centuries. This guy Coxey, Jacob Coxey, was a veteran. And because of a stock market crash due to manipulation, veterans were out of work. They were hungry. They were homeless. They were mad. They weren't getting their pension. They weren't getting anything that would stave them over. And so Coxey put together this army. He called it Coxey's Army of Veterans in the 1890s, in 1891, 92, something like that. Not sure the exact year. And they marched on Washington. They were attacked. They were all white. They were white men. Now there were black soldiers too. Maybe there were some like the Buffalo Soldiers. I'm not really sure, but you see the pictures because they had photos. They're pretty much all white. So that capitalist system wasn't working for them. It wasn't benefiting them. They weren't privileged, and they got attacked by cops. They got truncheons and beat up. So if a system isn't working for you, if it isn't working for your group, even if you can intellectually justify that, you're not going to like that system. And the response shouldn't be, well, lots of white people had that job and now they don't. So too bad. The response should be, we're going to make sure you have enough. We're going to make sure that we have lots of good jobs for people in this country. We're going to fight. Now, you may not get the job that you might have gotten 30 years ago. I'll be honest with you. Because we had discrimination in the past. And we're fighting that now. We're going to make things equal. Or we're going to try to make things fair. We can never make things totally equal or totally fair. But what we can do is guarantee that you have enough and that maybe you won't get that writing job you want or you won't get it right away, but you'll be able to apply going down the road. We're going to have more jobs. We're going to have more jobs in academia because we're going to make sure college is affordable for everybody. So more kids will get to go to college. That's the response. That's the right response. And I don't see that. And it's so upsetting to me. And Douthit, I don't really see how you can argue this or be pissed off or think he's being unfair. He's saying right here, and it just seems so clear to me that this is true. The rightward shift, the black pill, the extremism, I still don't quite know what a black pill is. The hard turn against all forms of immigration is not about new tech or post-liberal ideas or some kind of cultural coil from woke. Right. So he says it's not even wokeism. It's just jobs. It's just that simple. People don't have decent, fairly paying, interesting work. It's not there. And that's why they're saying this isn't working for us. We got to go somewhere else. I don't see why that's even controversial. Well, I'm going to finish with, and I don't know if I'm going to finish with, but I'm going to play Brianna Joy Gray because I was disappointed with the way she responded to this. Rather than just saying, hey, it makes sense. The society, the economy that we've seen constructed, at least since Ronald Reagan, under both Democratic and Republican presidents, hasn't created enough jobs. It hasn't created enough good jobs. It's left far too many Americans behind of all races. That's why we're seeing, again, black people who are saying, look, Trump's going to tear it all down. Trump's this kind of right-wing populist, but he's against, at least he says he's against free trade. He's against some kind of liberal economics. Who cannot understand why that would be appealing? It seems so clear to me that it would be. We need to provide a better alternative on the left. The Democrats haven't done that. Here's Brianna Joy Gray, and I really am disappointed in this response. I'm sorry to say this because she's like my favorite. But she doesn't want to credit the idea even that, yeah, efforts to balance the scales to make things a little bit fairer than they've been when it comes to non-whites have, in this economy, caused an understandable backlash. She doesn't want to go there. She wants to say, oh, it's BS. It's not true. We need these policies. I don't think Dowd is saying we shouldn't have those policies. He's saying that if there aren't good jobs, there are a limited number of good jobs, and we pit people against each other to get those jobs, they're going to resent each other. That's what he's saying. I don't think that's arguable. Here's Brianna Joy Gray.
In 2014 sort of era of life. And the argument goes, there are, narrow statistics that are pulled from certain universities like Yale. And the narrative goes, the Yale English department, let's say, has had, 10 new hires over the 10-year period. And none of them, or one of them, was a white male, and everybody else was some combination of everybody else. And this is because of basically diversity quotas. This has overwhelmingly disadvantaged young white men who want to enter these fields. And toward the end of the article, it acknowledges that part of the reason for this is that the senior positions all remain filled by white men. So the overall numbers are still overwhelmingly white men, but the people in charge aren't actually retiring, leaving those spaces for upward mobility, which would allow for...
Well, why would they? I mean, that's just a crazy comment from her, because people aren't going to leave. If they have a good job, they're large and in charge, they're not going to leave it. That's really good to be a department head at Yale. It's interesting. It's exciting work. You're not going to give it up. To expect people to do that, say, well, they should do it for the good of society. No. The right response to that is, okay, let's have more universities and colleges. Let's create more humanities programs. And how do you do that in an economy like ours, where all the money's in tech and sciences? You have to make a more diverse economy. You have to recognize that the problem isn't that a few people like their jobs and want to keep them. You have to create more good jobs.
To be upwardly mobile without having to keep the lower trenches of employment being brown.
So she's saying, what we can do is we can get rid of these deadwood at the top and replace them with others, and then everyone will be upwardly mobile. Well, there's a lot wrong with that view. One is, we wouldn't all be upwardly mobile. There's still going to be a very limited number of spots at the top. And the people who have those spots are going to hold on to them like grim death. And there aren't going to be, in the end, if you pursue this policy, which is, well, we just want to get rid of a few people at the top and open it up. And I'm not sure what happens at that point. There's still only going to be so many jobs. There's still going to be lots of people who don't get those jobs. And those people are going to be angry. They're going to be resentful. They're going to think it's not fair. I don't, it's just odd to me that you would think, well, it's fine to discriminate against one group of people because in the past, their parents, their fathers, their grandfathers got benefits. No, it's not fair. It's not fair to say we're going to look at you, we're going to be less likely to hire you. And even if they're less deserving, right? Even if the reason those white men aren't getting the jobs is because they're ultimately less deserving, than the people who are getting the jobs, they're still going to say, this isn't fair. This isn't right. Our lives aren't what they should be. We have to, work in, a restaurant for low wages. And you know what my answer is? Well, you might have to work in a restaurant. People do. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that kind of work. But you'll still get decent salary. Still have a nice place to live. You'll still have health care. So you can work on your dissertation and hopefully, polish it up so you can get a better opportunity. And guess what? We're also going to fund education much more than we have. That's the right answer. Not we're going to still have just the same number of lifeboats. And if you don't get on a lifeboat, you're going to drown. But we're just going to make sure those lifeboats are, have a fair proportion of every different group. So there'll be a fair number of women, fair number of men, fair number of blacks, whites, people from, foreign people, whatever. No, we need more lifeboats. We need to make sure everyone's in a lifeboat and no one's in a beautiful stateroom lording it over everyone else. That is my message. That is what I believe. And I think we have to join together to fight for that if we're ever going to get to the place we need to get to. All right, that's going to do it for this day, for Wednesday's Halitics. It's going to do it for this year's Halitics. Final plea, yes, please, my last request, if you haven't yet done so, do subscribe. And if you have subscribed, please interact in some way, some form with our video, like it, comment on it. And finally, if you've done those two things, share. Tell others about Halitics. Have a great afternoon. Thanks so much for being part of Halitics. Have a great end of the year, and I will see you